My daughter-in-law laughed in my face when I, barely able to walk from the pain in my hip, asked for $7,000 for surgery. We just blew all our money on a new yacht. Tough luck, old man. My son just smiled. Limping will make you stronger, Dad. Then my grandson, broke as could be, quietly handed me $900. I pawned my motorcycle, Grandpa. He had no idea this small act of kindness would unleash revenge so brutal they'd all scream in horror. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Lemuel Stanley. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a house on Westlake Drive in Austin, Texas. Spent 35 years as a county court judge before hanging up my robes 3 years ago. Always prided myself on fairness, on seeing through people's masks to their true intentions. Turns out I was blind to what was happening right under my own roof. The house isn't just any property. It's a beautiful 2-story colonial I bought back in 1987 for $127,000. Now it's worth $847,000 according to the latest assessment. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a terrace overlooking the garden where I used to spend Sunday mornings with coffee and the newspaper. Used to, because that terrace became someone else's domain about 3 years ago. My son Jeffrey is 42, sales manager at some tech company, always wearing those expensive suits and talking about disrupting markets and other nonsense I stopped trying to understand. He wasn't always like this. I remember when he was 8, he'd wait by the window every evening for me to come home from court, then run out shouting, "Dad's home!" Those memories feel like they belong to a different person now. The man who lives in my house today is someone I barely recognize. The change started when he married Lindsay 3 years ago. She's 38, calls herself a lifestyle coach, an Instagram influencer, has about 50,000 followers who watch her post pictures of overpriced coffee and sunsets with captions about living your best life. My best life apparently includes being treated like an inconvenient roommate in my own home. They moved in shortly after the wedding. "Just temporarily, Dad," Jeffrey said, "while we save for our own place." That was 3 years ago. They pay $400 a month for 3 bedrooms. $400. I could rent one room for $1,200 in this neighborhood, but Lindsay explained to me very sweetly that family helps family, and that I should be grateful for the company at my age. The first year I told myself it was fine. They were young, building their future. Jeffrey was still my son, but slowly the house stopped feeling like mine. Lindsay rearranged the living room without asking. She replaced my comfortable old couch with some modern monstrosity that looks artistic, but feels like sitting on concrete. She started calling the terrace her creative space, and got irritated when I'd try to have my morning coffee there. Jeffrey just went along with everything she said. Every single thing. I'd try to talk to him, and he'd give me that patient smile people use with children. "Dad, you need to be more flexible. Lindsay's just trying to make the space more welcoming." Welcoming for whom? I wanted to ask, but I bit my tongue. The morning of March 12th started like any other. My hip had been bothering me for months, a dull ache that had gradually become a sharp, stabbing pain every time I walked. I'd been putting off seeing a doctor, telling myself it was just age, just wear and tear. But that morning I couldn't even get out of bed without gasping. 3 hours later, I was sitting in Dr. Morrison's office at St. David's Medical Center, looking at x-rays of my hip joint. "You need surgery, Mr. Stanley," Dr. Morrison said, not sugarcoating it. "There's significant deterioration in the joint. Without intervention, you could lose mobility in that leg within 6 months." "What kind of intervention are we talking about?" "Hip replacement surgery. Not emergency level yet, but urgent. I'd recommend scheduling it within the next 3 weeks. "And the cost?" "With your Medicare, you're looking at about $7,000 out of pocket." I nodded slowly, my mind already calculating. I had $14,300 in savings, but it was locked in a long-term CD until September. Withdrawing early would cost me $2,400 in penalties and lost interest. $7,000 I could manage, but losing that extra money felt wasteful. especially when my son and daughter-in-law were living in my house, benefiting from my generosity. Jeffrey had a good job. He was always talking about his bonuses, his stock options. And Lindsay's Instagram apparently generated income, though I'd never understood how posting pictures of your breakfast could pay bills. Surely they could loan me $7,000 for 6 months. I'd pay them back when my CD matured, with interest if they wanted. It seemed reasonable. That evening I found them on the terrace, my terrace. Lindsay was setting up her phone on a tripod, arranging a charcuterie board for what I assumed was another photo session. Jeffrey stood beside her, holding a glass of wine and scrolling through his own phone. "Jeffrey, Lindsay, could I talk to you both for a minute?" Lindsay glanced up, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "We're kind of in the middle of something, Lemuel." She'd stopped calling me Dad about a year ago, started using my first name like we were colleagues, not family. "It's important," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I had a doctor's appointment today. I need surgery on my hip." That got Jeffrey's attention. He looked up from his phone, his expression showing what might have been concern. Might have been. "Surgery? Is it serious?" "Serious enough. Hip replacement. Needs to happen in the next few weeks, or I could lose the ability to walk properly." "That's rough, Dad," Jeffrey said, and his tone was sympathetic. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. "But you've got good insurance, right?" "Medicare covers most of it, but I'm still looking at $7,000 out of pocket. The thing is, my savings are tied up in a CD until September. I was hoping I could borrow the money from you two. I'd pay you back with interest as soon as the CD matures." The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour. Lindsay and Jeffrey exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations married couples have. Then Lindsay laughed, actually laughed, a light, tinkling sound that made my stomach drop. "Oh, Lemuel," she said, shaking her head, "the timing is just terrible. We literally just spent our savings on something major." "What do you mean?" Jeffrey had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "We bought a yacht, Dad. Well, a boat. It's a 35-footer. Got a great deal on it. Only $95,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $95,000 on a yacht, while I was asking for $7,000 to avoid becoming disabled. "You spent $95,000 on a boat?" My voice came out flat, emotionless. Inside, something was cracking. "It's an investment," Lindsay said, defensive now. "We're going to build our brand around lifestyle content. Weekend getaways, sunset cruises. This is going to take my Instagram to the next level. I need surgery." "And that's unfortunate timing," Lindsay said, her sympathy as fake as her eyelashes. "But we just don't have the money right now, old man. We spent it on the yacht. Bad luck for you, I guess." "Old man." She called me old man. I looked at Jeffrey, waiting for him to say something, to offer some alternative, to be the son I'd raised. He met my eyes, and for just a second I saw something there. Shame, maybe. Guilt. But then he straightened his shoulders and smiled. "You know what, Dad? Maybe this is a good thing. Struggling a bit, having to work around the pain. It builds character, makes you stronger. You'll be tougher for it." I stared at him. My son. The boy I'd coached in Little League, whose college I'd paid for, who'd lived rent-free in my house for 3 years. And he was telling me that limping around in pain would make me stronger. "You think limping will make me stronger?" I repeated slowly. "I mean it, Dad. Sometimes life throws us challenges. How we face them defines us." Lindsay had already turned back to her phone and her charcuterie board, dismissing me entirely. Jeffrey gave me one more of those patronizing smiles and followed her lead. I walked away, every step on that bad hip sending lightning bolts of agony up my spine. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what I felt inside. Not just hurt, something colder, something that felt like the beginning of clarity. They'd chosen a yacht over my ability to walk, and they'd done it without a second thought. I sat in my bedroom for a long time after that conversation, staring at the wall. The house was quiet, except for the sound of Lindsay's laughter drifting up from the terrace. She was probably taking her photos now, crafting the perfect caption about gratitude and living in the moment. The irony wasn't lost on me. My hip throbbed, a steady reminder of everything that had just happened. $7,000. I'd given Jeffrey more than that for his wedding alone. The rehearsal dinner I'd hosted cost $8,400. I'd paid for his honeymoon when they complained the one they wanted was too expensive, another $6,000. And now, when I needed a fraction of what I'd given him, he bought a yacht and told me pain builds character. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my bank account. The CD sat there, $14,300, maturity date September 15th. If I withdrew now, I'd lose $2,400. But what choice did I have? I couldn't wait 6 months. Dr. Morrison had been clear. The next morning I went to the bank. The manager, a pleasant woman named Carol, who'd handled my accounts for years, processed the early withdrawal with a sympathetic look. "Everything okay, Mr. Stanley?" "Medical expenses?" I said simply. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I'm sorry you had to break the CD. That's a significant penalty." "Can't be helped." Walking out of that bank, I felt something shift inside me. I had $12,000 in my checking account now, minus the penalties. Enough for the surgery and a few months of expenses if I was careful. But more importantly, I had clarity. This was the last time. The last time I'd sacrifice for Jeffrey. The last time I'd make excuses for him. The last time I'd be the understanding father while he and Lindsay treated my home like their personal ATM and photo studio. I scheduled the surgery for April 3rd and tried not to think about the fact that my own son couldn't spare a single dollar to help me. That evening I couldn't sleep. The pain in my hip was worse, or maybe I was just more aware of it now. Around 11 I got up to get some water. The house was dark, but I could hear voices from the terrace. Jeffrey and Lindsay having what sounded like their nightly wine session. I should have gone back to bed. I should have taken my water and retreated to my room. But something made me move closer to the open window near the terrace, made me listen. "I give it another year, tops," Lindsay was saying, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet night. "Did you see how he could barely walk? The surgery might buy him some time, but he's falling apart." "He's not that old, babe. My dad's pretty healthy overall." "Healthy?" Lindsay laughed, that same tinkling sound from earlier. "Jeffrey, he's 68, and he needs major surgery. Face it, he's declining. And honestly, once he gets really bad, we can just move him into one of those cheap assisted living places. They have facilities that'll take people on Medicare. $2,000 a month, maybe less. I don't know. Come on, you know it makes sense. He can't maintain this house forever. Once he's out, we can take over. It's worth $847,000. We could live here for years, build equity, or sell it and buy something even better. Plus, with him in a home, we won't have to deal with the guilt trips anymore." There was a pause. I held my breath, waiting for Jeffrey to defend me, to say something, anything that would indicate he still saw me as his father and not just an obstacle to his inheritance. "You're probably right," he finally said. "He'll be better off in a facility anyway. People his age need that kind of care." "Exactly. And we deserve this house. After everything we've done for him, everything they'd done for me, living here for $400 a month, using my home as their personal content studio, eating food I bought while Lindsay criticized my grocery choices as not Instagram worthy." I stood there in the dark, my hand gripping my water glass so hard I thought it might shatter. But I didn't move. I listened to them plan my future, laughing about shipping me off to the cheapest facility they could find so they could take what I'd spent a lifetime building. That was the moment everything changed. Not when they refused to help with the surgery, not when Lindsay called me an old man, or when Jeffrey said pain builds character. This moment, hearing them casually discuss disposing of me like an inconvenient piece of furniture. That was when something cold and clear settled over me. I went back to my room and sat in the darkness for hours, my mind working through possibilities. 35 years as a judge had taught me a lot about human nature, about the law, about the loopholes people think they're clever for finding. It had also taught me patience. The best verdicts weren't rushed. They were carefully constructed, built on solid foundations of fact and precedent. Jeffrey and Lindsay thought they were so smart, thought they had it all figured out, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated the old man, the one who'd built his career on seeing through exactly the kind of people they were. I thought about the house, about the paperwork I'd signed over the years, about the helpful arrangements I'd made when Jeffrey needed money for various ventures, including that yacht, about the trust documents sitting in my filing cabinet, the ones I'd set up with my lawyer, back when I still believed in planning for my son's future. By the time the sun rose, I had the beginning of a plan. Nothing concrete yet, just the framework. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Jeffrey and Lindsay wanted my house. They were counting on me being too weak, too old, too defeated to stop them. They were wrong. The surgery could wait 3 more weeks. In the meantime, I had research to do, documents to review, options to explore. I'd spent 35 years presiding over cases where people fought over property, inheritance, and family betrayals. I knew every trick, every legal maneuver, every way the system could be used by someone who understood it. And I understood it better than they could possibly imagine. I made myself coffee that morning, the way I liked it, strong and black. Then I went to my study and pulled out the filing cabinet where I kept all my important documents. Financial records, property deeds, trust agreements, every piece of paper that detailed my relationship with Jeffrey and Lindsay. Somewhere in here was the key to making sure they got exactly what they deserved. And as I spread the documents across my desk, my hip throbbing with every movement, I smiled. Not a happy smile. Something colder. Let them enjoy their yacht. Let them take their photos and plan their future in my house. Let them think they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. The surgery happened 3 weeks later, exactly as scheduled. They wheeled me into the operating room at St. David's Medical Center on a Thursday morning, and when I woke up 6 hours later, I had a new titanium hip and a bill for exactly $7,000 sitting in my hospital account. Jeffrey and Lindsay didn't visit, not during the surgery, not during my overnight stay, not when I was discharged the following afternoon. The nurse who helped me into the wheelchair seemed surprised when I told her I'd be taking a taxi home. "No family picking you up?" she asked, concern creasing her forehead. "They're busy," I said. The lie tasted bitter, but it was easier than the truth. The first 2 weeks of recovery were brutal. Not just the physical pain, though. That was considerable. It was being alone in that house, hearing Jeffrey and Lindsay moving around upstairs, their voices drifting down through the vents, hearing them laugh, hearing Lindsay on her phone, scheduling photo shoots on her terrace, hearing Jeffrey make plans for the weekend, taking the yacht out with friends. Not once did either of them knock on my door to ask how I was doing. I spent those days in my bedroom, doing the physical therapy exercises the hospital had given me, building strength back in my leg, but more importantly, I was watching, observing, seeing things I'd been too trusting to notice before. Lindsay left every morning around 9, usually with her ring light and camera equipment. She'd return around 2, arms full of shopping bags, designer bags, the kind that cost more than my monthly utility bill. I started paying attention to her Instagram posts, scrolling through them on my phone while I did my leg exercises. There she was, posing in my living room, promoting a skincare company. Another post on my terrace, advertising some overpriced coffee subscription. Another in the guest bedroom she'd converted into her studio, holding up jewelry that she tagged with affiliate links. I did some math. Conservative estimates put her earnings at around $3,200 a month from these sponsorships, maybe more. All of it filmed in my house, using my property as her backdrop. None of it declared to me as additional rent. None of it, I was willing to bet, properly reported for taxes. Interesting, Jeffrey was easier to observe. He kept his routine rigid, leave at 7:30 for work, return at 6:30, immediately pour himself a drink and join Lindsay on the terrace. Every evening, the same conversation topics. His latest sale, her latest sponsorship opportunity, their plans for the yacht. The yacht. They talked about it constantly. How much attention it was getting on social media, how they were thinking of renting it out when they weren't using it. "Easy money," Lindsay said one evening, her voice floating down from the terrace to where I sat in my study, pretending to read. "We could charge $850 a day, maybe more on holiday weekends." I made a note of that. The yacht had been purchased with a loan secured against my house, a loan that Jeffrey had needed my signature to obtain, because the house was still in a family trust I'd set up years ago. I'd signed those papers without reading them too carefully, trusting my son, believing he just needed help getting started. The trust documents were in my filing cabinet. I'd pulled them out that first night, but I looked at them again now with clearer eyes, and there it was, in black and white. I was still the primary trustee. Jeffrey was listed as beneficiary upon my death, but the trust was revocable. I could change it any time I wanted. I could also, as trustee, demand immediate payment of any debts secured against trust property. The yacht loan was $73,400 after their down payment. They were paying it off over 10 years, but if I revoked my guarantee, the loan would become immediately due. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, wincing as my new hip protested the movement. Outside, I could hear Lindsay laughing at something on her phone, probably reading comments on her latest post. Comments from strangers who thought she had the perfect life, the perfect home, the perfect marriage. None of them knew she was living in her father-in-law's house for $400 a month, while she earned thousands using his property. None of them knew she'd laughed when he asked for help with surgery. None of them knew she was planning to warehouse him in the cheapest facility she could find. The anger that had been building since that night on the terrace crystallized into something sharper, colder. Not rage. Rage was hot and stupid and made you do things you'd regret. This was different. This was the feeling I used to get in court when I knew exactly how a case would end, when all the pieces fell into place and justice was inevitable. On the 18th day after my surgery, someone knocked on my bedroom door. Not Jeffrey, not Lindsay. When I called out, "Come in," the door opened to reveal my grandson, Caleb. I hadn't seen him in months. Jeffrey's son from his first marriage, 22 years old, studying mechanical engineering at the University of Texas. Tall, lean, with grease stains on his hands from the garage where he worked part-time to pay for textbooks. "Grandpa," he said, and his face went pale when he saw me in the chair, still moving slowly. "I just heard about the surgery. Dad didn't tell me. I ran into Mrs. Chen from next door at the grocery store, and she mentioned it. It's fine, Caleb. I'm recovering well." "It's not fine." He came into the room, setting down a canvas bag that clinked with the sound of glass jars. "I brought groceries. Real food, not whatever Instagram nonsense Lindsay's probably buying. And I brought you this." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. It was thick, and when I opened it, 9 $100 bills fell onto my lap. "Caleb, what?" "I pawned my motorcycle," he said quickly. "Got $900 for it. I know it's not much, and I know the surgery's already done. But I figured you might have other expenses. Medicine. Physical therapy. Whatever you need." I stared at the money in my lap. $900. This kid, who barely scraped by on his mechanic's wages and student loans, had pawned his motorcycle, his only transportation besides the bus, the bike he'd saved for 2 years to buy. "I can't accept this." "You have to." He sat down on the edge of my bed, his young face serious. "You've always been there for me, Grandpa. When Dad left Mom, when things got hard, you were the one who showed up. You paid for my SAT prep course. You helped me with my first semester textbook fees. You came to my high school graduation when Dad was too busy. You're family. Real family." The envelope trembled in my hands. Real family. This boy understood what his father had forgotten. "Your motorcycle, Caleb. You need it for work. I'll take the bus for a while. It's fine. You needed help, and I wasn't there. This is the least I can do." I looked at him, this earnest young man who'd given up something he treasured to help someone he loved. And I thought about Jeffrey, upstairs, drinking wine on a yacht he'd bought with money he could have used to help his own father. Lindsay earning thousands monthly from my property while refusing to contribute a dime to my surgery. "Thank you," I said quietly, "but I want you to take this back to the pawn shop next week. I'll give you the money." "Grandpa, please. I'm doing better than you think, financially. But what you did here, what you offered, that means more than you know." We talked for another hour. He helped me with some of the heavier physical therapy exercises, made me dinner from the groceries he'd brought, told me about his classes and his work at the garage. When he finally left, he hugged me carefully, mindful of my healing hip. "I'll come back this weekend," he promised. "Check on you." I'd like that. After he left, I sat in my chair for a long time, looking at the envelope of money on the side table. Caleb had pawned his motorcycle. Lindsay had bought a yacht. The contrast couldn't have been sharper, and that's when I knew exactly what I was going to do. The following week, I made a phone call, not to a friend. I didn't have many of those left after 3 years of isolation in my own home, but I knew where to find what I needed. Martinez and Associates Law Firm, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with an attorney about trust and property law, I said, preferably someone familiar with Texas estate law. They connected me to Gerald Martinez. We set up an appointment for the following Monday at his office on Congress Avenue in downtown Austin. The trip downtown was my first real journey since the surgery. I called a taxi, refusing to ask Jeffrey for a ride. The building was professional, but not ostentatious, a good sign. Lawyers who spent too much on fancy offices usually charged accordingly. Gerald Martinez was about 55, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of steady gaze that suggested he'd seen everything. He didn't waste time on small talk. "Mr. Stanley, you mentioned on the phone you need help with a trust issue?" I pulled out the folder I'd brought. 3 years ago, I created a living trust, listed my son as beneficiary. Since then, he's taken out loans against the property in the trust, with my signature as guarantor. I need to know what my options are. He spent 20 minutes reading through the documents, making notes on a legal pad. Finally, he looked up. "This is interesting. You're listed as primary trustee with full discretionary powers. The trust is revocable, which means you can modify or dissolve it at any time. Your son is listed as beneficiary upon your death. But," he tapped a paragraph on page 3, "there's nothing preventing you from changing that designation. What about the loan? The one secured against the house for his yacht purchase?" Gerald flipped to another document. "You co-signed as trustee, essentially putting up the house as collateral. The loan document here shows $73,400 outstanding. If you were to revoke your position as guarantor or dissolve the trust, the loan would become immediately callable. The lender could demand full payment within 30 days. And if my son can't pay, they'd foreclose on the collateral. In this case, that would mean seizing and selling the yacht to recover their money." I sat back, processing this. "What about the house itself? My son and his wife live there with me. They pay minimal rent, $400 monthly. Do they have a lease? No. It was meant to be temporary." Gerald made another note. "Under Texas law, without a lease, they're considered tenants, at will. As the property owner and trustee, you can terminate their tenancy with proper notice, typically 30 days delivered in writing. Even though he's my son, family relationship doesn't change the legal requirements. If anything, it simplifies matters since there's no lease to break." He paused, studying my face. "May I ask what's prompted this inquiry?" I could have given him the sanitized version, could have kept my dignity intact, pretended this was just estate planning, but something about his direct manner made me tell the truth. I told him about the surgery, the refusal to help, the yacht, Lindsay's Instagram business run from my property, the conversation I'd overheard about the assisted living facility, all of it. When I finished, Gerald was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've been practicing law for 28 years. I've seen a lot of family situations. This one's particularly calculating on their part." He pushed the documents back across the desk. "If you want to proceed, I can help you. But I need to be clear. Once you start this process, there's no going back. Family relationships will be permanently damaged." "They already are," I said. "I'm just accepting it now. My retainer for a case like this would be $5,000. That covers document preparation, legal notices, and representation if they contest anything, which they likely will. $5,000. Almost all of what I had left after the surgery. But Caleb's visit had crystallized something in me. I'd been so focused on not losing money from the CD that I'd forgotten what money was actually for. It was a tool, and right now I needed this particular tool. "I'll write you a check." We spent the next hour going over strategy. Gerald would prepare new trust documents, changing the beneficiary designation. He'd draft a formal notice to Jeffrey and Lindsay terminating their tenancy. He'd prepare the paperwork to revoke my guarantee on the yacht loan. "When do you want to execute this?" he asked. I thought about the calendar. It was early May now. Jeffrey and Lindsay had been talking about a big party on the yacht. First weekend of June, Lindsay had said. She was planning to invite 40 people, turn it into a major Instagram event. "I want everything ready by the end of May," I said, "but don't file or serve anything until I give the word. I want the timing to be precise." Gerald smiled slightly. 35 years as a judge. You understand the value of timing. I understand the value of justice. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a different person. Not overnight. It was gradual, like ice forming on a pond. Each day a little colder, a little harder, a little more certain. I started documenting everything. Times when Lindsay used the house for commercial photo shoots. Conversations about renting the yacht. Jeffrey's dismissive comments when I asked simple questions about household matters. I kept a notebook in my study, dated entries, objective observations. I also hired someone else Gerald recommended, a private investigator named Marcus Johnson, former police detective, now running his own firm. His fee was $1,200 for 3 weeks of surveillance and research. "What exactly am I looking for?" Marcus asked during our first meeting. "Evidence of commercial activity in my home without proper licensing. Evidence of income not being reported. Evidence of them using property that doesn't belong to them for profit." Marcus was thorough. Within a week, he had photographs of Lindsay's ring light set up in 3 different rooms of my house, screenshots of her Instagram posts with sponsor tags and affiliate links, calculations of her probable monthly income, records showing she'd never applied for a business license in Travis County, despite running what was clearly a commercial operation from a residential property. He also found something I hadn't known about. Jeffrey and Lindsay were listing the yacht on a boat rental website. $850 a day. They'd already had 6 bookings according to the site's calendar. That was over $5,000 in rental income. Income from a boat that was purchased with a loan secured against my house. A boat they technically didn't own. A boat that would be foreclosed on if I pulled my guarantee. "They're not very smart," Marcus observed, handing me his final report. "Or they think you're not paying attention. They think I'm a doddering old man waiting to die." "Are you?" I looked at him. "What do you think?" He smiled. "I think they made a serious miscalculation. The last piece fell into place on the 28th of May. I called a notary, Patricia Green, and paid her $300 to come to the house. We waited until Jeffrey and Lindsay went out for lunch, one of their usual Instagram-worthy brunches, and then she witnessed my signature on the new trust documents. Caleb was now the primary beneficiary. Not upon my death. That was too far away, too uncertain. No, these documents gave him immediate partial ownership, and they included something else Gerald had suggested, a power of attorney, giving Caleb legal authority to make decisions about the trust if I became incapacitated. "This is very generous," Patricia said as she notarized the final page. "It's fair," I corrected. "He's the only one who's earned it." After she left, I called Caleb, asked him to come by that evening. When he arrived, I handed him the folder. "What's this, Grandpa?" "Your future. Read it." I watched his face as he went through the documents. Watched the confusion turn to shock, turn to something that looked like tears. "You're putting the house in my name?" "Half now, through the trust structure. The other half when I'm gone. You'll have full authority to manage the property, if anything happens to me." "But why? What about Dad?" "Your father made his choice when he bought a yacht instead of helping me walk. You made your choice when you pawned your motorcycle to help me eat. Choices have consequences, Caleb. That's something I learned in 35 years on the bench." He was crying now, not bothering to hide it. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll help me make sure this house stays in hands that deserve it." "Always, Grandpa. Always." That night, I sat in my study after Caleb left. The documents were filed. The investigator's report was complete. Gerald had everything ready to serve. All that remained was choosing the moment. Jeffrey and Lindsay's party was scheduled for the 1st of June. 40 guests, a catered event costing over $4,000. Lindsay had been posting about it for weeks, building anticipation, promising her followers an exclusive look at their yacht lifestyle. I thought about timing, about maximum impact, about the moment when justice would be most poetic. And I smiled. Not the cold smile from before. Something sharper. Something that came from knowing exactly how the story would end, because I was writing it myself. Let them have their party. Let them send the invitations, order the catering, pose for their photos. Let them think they'd won, that the old man was beaten, that their future was secure. They'd learn the truth soon enough. After all, I'd spent 35 years delivering verdicts, and this was going to be my masterpiece. The investigation Marcus was running took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of watching Jeffrey and Lindsay continue their charade, oblivious to the fact that their every move was being documented. 3 weeks of me playing the part of the defeated old man while the evidence mounted. Marcus was thorough. I'd meet him at a coffee shop downtown every few days, away from the house, away from prying eyes. He'd slide folders across the table, and I'd review them over black coffee that had long since gone cold. The first folder contained screenshots, hundreds of them. Lindsay's Instagram feed, posts going back 18 months. There she was, lounging on my terrace with a sponsored water bottle. Stay hydrated with Crystal Pure. Use code Lindsay20 for 20% off. Another post in my living room. Loving these organic candles from Earthglow. Link in bio. The guest bedroom she'd claimed as her studio. Check out my new ring light setup from TechBrite. Perfect for content creators. Marcus had done the math. Based on typical influencer rates and her follower count, she was pulling in approximately $3,200 monthly from these sponsorships. Maybe more. All filmed in my house. All using my property as her commercial backdrop. Does she have a business license? I asked. Marcus shook his head. Checked with Travis County. Nothing registered under her name or any LLC connected to her. She's running an unlicensed commercial operation out of a residential property. That violates the trust terms, I said, more to myself than to him. The second folder was even more interesting. The yacht rental scheme. Marcus had found their listing on a boat-sharing website. Luxury 35-foot yacht on Lake Travis. $850 per day. Captain services available. They'd had 14 bookings over 2 months. That was almost $12,000 in gross income. Problem is, Marcus said, tapping the rental agreement I'd signed for the yacht loan, the boat's technically collateral on a loan secured against your property. Renting out collateral without the lender's knowledge is fraud, and I'm guessing they're not declaring this income. You'd be guessing correctly. The third folder made me pause. It was a series of text message screenshots. Lindsay's phone, obtained through methods Marcus declined to explain but assured me were legal. Her conversation with a friend. Can't wait for the old man to finally kick it. Jeffrey says the house is worth almost $1 million. We could sell it, buy something in California, really build the brand. And another, he's so pathetic now, limping around like a wounded dog. Jeffrey thinks another year, maybe 2. Then it's off to the cheapest nursing home we can find. And the one that made my hands shake. Honestly, if he'd just die already, we could move on with our lives. The surgery probably bought him a few more years. Worse luck for us. I closed the folder, took a deep breath. Marcus watched me carefully. You okay? I'm fine. This is exactly what I needed. The last folder contained the financial analysis. Marcus had worked with a forensic accountant. Between Lindsay's undeclared sponsorship income and the yacht rentals, they'd likely failed to report at least $50,000 in income over the past 2 years. The accountant estimated tax liability at $18,400, plus penalties around $6,200. If someone were to report this to the IRS, Marcus said carefully, they'd probably launch an audit. Someone should probably do that, I agreed. By the final week of May, everything was ready. Gerald had prepared all the legal documents, the loan revocation notice for the bank, the eviction notice for Jeffrey and Lindsay, the modified trust papers making Caleb the primary beneficiary. Everything was signed, notarized, and ready to be served. The yacht party was scheduled for the 1st of June. Lindsay had been posting about it constantly. Can't wait to share our yacht lifestyle with 40 of our closest friends. Sunset cruise, gourmet catering, exclusive content for my followers. The excitement in her posts was palpable. I spent that last week of May making my own preparations. I moved my important documents to a safe deposit box at the bank. I had Caleb help me relocate my collection of antique legal documents to his apartment, safer there than in the house. I even got my hip checked by Dr. Morrison. The surgery had been a complete success. I was walking without pain for the first time in over a year. "You're healing remarkably well," Dr. Morrison said. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." "Oh, I intend to." The night before the party, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, from anticipation. I'd spent weeks planning this moment, and tomorrow it would all come together. Jeffrey and Lindsay were up late. I could hear them on the terrace, finalizing details. Lindsay's voice carried through my open window. "The caterer arrives at 1, guests at 3. The weather's supposed to be perfect. This is going to be amazing content." "Did you invite my dad?" Jeffrey asked. Lindsay laughed. "Why would I do that? He'd just bring down the whole vibe. Plus, he can barely walk. Imagine him trying to get on a boat." "Fair point." I listened to them laugh together, planning their perfect party on their perfect yacht, living their perfect life in my house. And I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow morning, Gerald would file the loan revocation with the bank at 9. By 10, the bank would have notified the sheriff's office. By 2 in the afternoon, just as they were setting up for their 3 o'clock party, the sheriff would arrive at the yacht club with seizure documents. The timing would be perfect. Guests arriving, catering set up, Lindsay probably doing a live Instagram feed, and then the sheriff would arrive to seize the yacht for loan default. I finally fell asleep around 2 in the morning, my last thought a simple one. Tomorrow, justice begins. The morning arrived with clear skies and perfect weather, exactly what Jeffrey and Lindsay had been hoping for. I stayed in my room, listening to them rush around the house, loading supplies into their car, chairs, decorations, Lindsay's camera equipment. They were so focused on their preparations that they walked past my door a dozen times without knocking once. At 9 o'clock, my phone rang. "Gerald." "It's done," he said. "Filed the revocation with the bank at opening. They've confirmed the loan is now in default. Sheriff's office has been notified and has agreed to execute the seizure at 2 this afternoon." "Perfect timing. Are you sure you want to do this, Lemuel? Once the yacht is seized, there's no going back." "I've never been more sure of anything." I spent the next few hours preparing. I showered, dressed in one of my good suits, the kind I used to wear to court. It felt appropriate. Today was Judgment Day, after all. At 1:30, I called a taxi, asked the driver to take me to the Austin Yacht Club on Lake Travis. It was a 20-minute drive, and I spent it looking out the window, watching Austin pass by. Somewhere out there, Jeffrey and Lindsay were probably already at the yacht, setting up, completely unaware of what was coming. The yacht club parking lot was already filling up when I arrived. I paid the driver and walked slowly toward the docks, my new hip working perfectly. No limp, no pain. Just steady, determined steps. I found a bench with a clear view of Jeffrey's slip. The yacht was there, all 35 feet of it, gleaming white in the afternoon sun. Jeffrey and Lindsay were on deck with 2 catering staff, setting up tables, arranging flowers. Lindsay had her phone out, already filming. "Getting ready for the party of the summer," she was saying to her camera. "Can't wait to show you all this amazing setup." I checked my watch. 1:55. 5 minutes. The first guests started arriving. Couples in their 30s and 40s, dressed in expensive casual wear. They gathered on the dock, taking photos, admiring the yacht. Lindsay was in her element, greeting everyone, posing for pictures, her smile wide and perfect. 2 o'clock. A Travis County Sheriff's Department vehicle pulled into the parking lot. 2 officers got out, one carrying a folder of documents. They walked purposefully toward the docks, and I felt my heart rate increase, not from fear, from satisfaction. The sheriff's deputy, a woman in her 40s with iron gray hair, approached the yacht just as Lindsay was welcoming her 10th guest aboard. "Excuse me," the deputy called out. "I'm looking for Jeffrey Stanley." Jeffrey, who'd been opening a bottle of champagne, looked up. "That's me. Can I help you?" The deputy stepped onto the boat without asking permission. Professional. Efficient. She handed Jeffrey the folder. "Mr. Stanley, this vessel is being seized for loan default. The lien holder has revoked guarantee on the loan, making the full amount immediately due. You have failed to make payment. I need everyone to disembark immediately." The color drained from Jeffrey's face so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. It reminded me of a fish gasping on a dock. Lindsay's smile froze. She was still holding her phone, still filming, and I could see the exact moment her influencer persona cracked. Her eyes went wide, her perfectly made-up face suddenly looking very young and very scared. "What?" Jeffrey finally managed. "There must be some mistake. The loan's current. I make the payments every month." The loan was guaranteed by a trust property owner. That guarantee has been legally revoked as of this morning. The loan is now in default, and the lender has exercised their right to immediate seizure. But we have 40 people coming. We have a party." The second deputy, a younger man, had produced yellow seizure tape and was already beginning to cordon off the vessel. "I understand that's inconvenient, sir, but you need to disembark now. This vessel is property of First National Bank as of 2 o'clock this afternoon." Lindsay found her voice. It came out as a screech. "You can't do this. This is our boat. We paid for it." "Ma'am, according to these documents, you have an outstanding loan balance of $73,400. If you'd like to retain the vessel, you can pay that amount in full within 24 hours. Otherwise, it will be sold at auction." The guests on the dock were murmuring now, phones out, filming. Some of Lindsay's followers, no doubt. This was going to be all over social media within minutes. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jeffrey's hands were shaking as he tried to read the legal documents. I could see him scanning the pages, his face getting progressively paler. Then he found it, the signature at the bottom of the revocation notice. "My father," he whispered, then louder, "my father did this." Lindsay snatched the papers from him. Her eyes, when she read my name, turned into something ugly, something that showed exactly who she really was beneath the Instagram filters. That old... She caught herself, aware of the cameras still recording. "We need to call him now." Jeffrey pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. I could see him from my bench, could see every detail of his panic. He dialed. My phone rang in my pocket. I answered on the third ring. "Dad! Dad, what's happening? The sheriff is here. They're seizing the boat. They say you revoked the guarantee on your loan," I finished calmly. "Yes. I did that this morning." "But why?" "Dad, we have 40 people here. We have a party. This is..." "Jeffrey, do you remember what you told me when I asked to borrow $7,000 for my surgery? When I asked for help so I wouldn't lose the ability to walk?" Silence on the other end. "You told me that struggling through pain would make me stronger, that limping would build my character." I let that sink in. "Well, son, I took your advice. I got stronger. And now I'm teaching you the same lesson. Struggling without a yacht will build your character." "Dad, please." "I'm also activating my rights as trustee of the living trust that holds the house. You and Lindsay have 30 days to vacate the property. You'll receive formal eviction notice by tomorrow." "You can't do that," Lindsay's voice shrill in the background. "Actually, Mrs. Stanley, I can. And I am. You've been living in my house for 3 years, paying a fraction of fair rent, using my property for commercial purposes without permission, and planning to warehouse me in the cheapest nursing home you could find. Did you really think I didn't know?" I could hear Lindsay's breathing, fast and panicked. "The house is being transferred to Caleb, my grandson, the one who pawned his motorcycle to bring me $900 when I needed help. Unlike his father, he understands what family means." "Dad, wait." "You have 30 days, Jeffrey. I suggest you start packing." I ended the call, sat back on the bench, watched from a distance as Jeffrey stood frozen on the yacht deck, phone still pressed to his ear, watched as Lindsay grabbed his arm, her face twisted with rage, watched as the deputies cleared the vessel and began securing it with official seizure tape. The guests were dispersing, confused and uncomfortable. Some were filming. I could already imagine the Instagram stories. Yacht party shut down by cops. Lindsay's perfect influencer life was crumbling in real time, documented by the same phones that had built her brand. I stood up from the bench, every movement smooth and painless. The new hip was working beautifully. As I walked toward the parking lot to call another taxi, I passed close enough to see Lindsay's face clearly. She'd been crying. Her makeup was running. Her hands were clenched into fists, and her eyes, when they met mine across the distance, held pure hatred. I smiled at her. Not a cruel smile, just satisfied. The smile of someone who'd spent weeks planning the perfect verdict and had just watched it executed flawlessly. Jeffrey saw me then. His face went through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, confusion, betrayal, and finally something that might have been understanding. He knew now. Knew that he'd underestimated the old man. I called my taxi and left them standing there among the ruins of their perfect party, their seized yacht behind them, 40 confused guests drifting away, and the reality of their situation finally sinking in. This was just the beginning. The eviction notice would arrive tomorrow, and I had other plans, other moves still to make. But for now, this moment was enough. Justice, I'd always believed, should be precise, calculated, delivered at exactly the right moment for maximum impact. And watching Jeffrey and Lindsay's perfect afternoon collapse around them, I knew I'd timed it perfectly. The formal eviction notice arrived at the house the next morning via certified mail. I heard the doorbell, heard Jeffrey's footsteps down the stairs, heard the brief exchange with the postal carrier. Then silence, a long, heavy silence that told me he was reading the documents. I stayed in my study, organizing my antique legal document collection, listening, waiting. The explosion came about 5 minutes later. Lindsay's voice, high and furious. "He can't do this. We have rights." "According to this, we don't." Jeffrey's voice was dull, defeated. "There's no lease. We're tenants at will. He can terminate our tenancy with 30 days' notice. It's all here. Legal citations, case precedents, everything. Then we'll fight it. We'll get a lawyer." That's exactly what I expected them to do. Within hours, they'd called every real estate attorney in Austin. I knew this because Caleb, who'd stopped by that afternoon, overheard Lindsay on the phone. The third lawyer she called, Caleb told me, sitting in my study with coffee. She was screaming into the phone about how much she'd pay if they could find a loophole. $8,000 up front. I nodded. They'll take the money, but there's no loophole to find. 2 days later, I was proven right. The attorney they'd hired, some ambitious young man from a firm downtown, came to the house. I watched from my window as he arrived, briefcase in hand, looking confident. He left an hour later, looking considerably less so. That evening I heard the conversation from the terrace. They'd left the window open and voices carry. "What did he say?" Lindsay demanded. "He said—" Jeffrey's voice cracked. "He said Dad's too smart. The trust was set up perfectly. Every document is airtight. Even the yacht loan, he structured it, so that revoking his guarantee was completely within his rights. The lawyer actually laughed, said Dad was a genius. That's it? We paid him $8,000 and that's all he can tell us? He said we could file a lawsuit, but we'd lose. It would just cost us more money we don't have. Lindsay, we need to accept this. We have to move out." The sound of something shattering. Lindsay had thrown something. "I'm not accepting anything. That old man humiliated us, seized our boat in front of 40 people. Do you know how many followers I've lost? 15,000. My sponsorships are canceling. Nobody wants to work with someone whose life is falling apart on camera." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the text messages Marcus had found. If he'd just die already, we could move on with our lives. The next day, Lindsay made her move. She posted on Instagram a long emotional post about elder abuse, about how her toxic father-in-law was evicting them out of spite, about how they'd sacrificed to care for him, and this was their reward. The post got attention, 1,200 comments in the first hour. I watched the count climb from my phone, curious to see how her followers would react. Then something unexpected happened. Someone, I never found out who, posted screenshots, old screenshots of Lindsay's previous posts, the ones where she'd casually mentioned the old man and can't wait for the inheritance, the ones where she'd complained about having to live with Jeffrey's ancient father. The comments turned, fast. "So you were using him for cheap rent? You called him ancient and now you're playing victim? Elder abuse is real, but this ain't it, sis." Within a day, she'd lost another 10,000 followers. Brands that had been on the fence about working with her dropped her entirely. Her Instagram empire, built so carefully over years, crumbled faster than I'd expected. I didn't gloat. I simply watched, made notes, and waited for the next phase. Almost 2 weeks after the yacht seizure, they came to me, both of them. I was in the living room reading when they knocked on the doorframe. "Dad?" Jeffrey's voice was tentative. "Can we talk?" I looked up. They both looked terrible. Jeffrey's expensive suits were wrinkled now, his face drawn. Lindsay had aged 5 years in 2 weeks. Her Instagram-perfect makeup couldn't hide the stress lines around her eyes. "Of course. Sit down." They sat on the couch, Lindsay's couch, the one she'd bought without asking. The irony wasn't lost on me. "We want to apologize," Jeffrey started. "We were wrong. About everything. The surgery, the yacht, how we treated you. We see that now." Lindsay jumped in, her voice carefully modulated. Professional. Her influencer voice. "We'd like to make things right. We'll pay $2,000 a month for rent. We'll help with the house maintenance. We'll be better." I let the silence stretch, watched them squirm. "When I needed $7,000 for surgery," I said finally, "so I could walk without pain, you bought a $95,000 yacht. You told me struggling would make me stronger." "I know, Dad. I was wrong. When I was recovering, alone, unable to even get groceries, neither of you checked on me, not once. But Caleb came. Caleb pawned his motorcycle, his only transportation, to bring me $900. $900 he couldn't afford to lose." Lindsay opened her mouth, closed it. She had nothing to say to that. "The house is going to Caleb," I continued, "not as punishment, as justice. He earned it. You didn't. And no amount of apologies changes that." "But we're family." "Family," I cut Jeffrey off, "is defined by actions, not blood. Caleb proved he's family. You proved you're not. You have until the 1st of July. That's 2 weeks from today. I suggest you start looking for an apartment." They left without another word. Lindsay was crying. Jeffrey looked broken. And I felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of a verdict delivered. But I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. People like Lindsay never did. They'd try something else, another angle, another manipulation. I was ready for it. Because I had one more move to make. One more strike that would ensure they understood the full weight of their choices. The next day, I called Marcus. "I need you to submit that evidence package to the IRS," I said, "the one documenting their unreported income." "You sure about this? It's going to get ugly." "I'm sure." Marcus had already prepared everything. The evidence of Lindsay's Instagram earnings, over $50,000 in 2 years, none of it declared. The yacht rental income, $12,000, completely off the books. Tax fraud, clear and documented. "I'll file it anonymously," Marcus said. "The IRS usually takes months to act, but with documentation this solid, they might move faster." They did, much faster than I expected. 10 days later, on a Wednesday morning, an official letter arrived at the house. I heard Lindsay's scream from my study. The Internal Revenue Service was conducting an audit. They wanted documentation of all income for the previous 2 tax years. They had evidence of unreported business activity. Failure to comply would result in immediate penalties and possible criminal charges. I didn't need to see the letter. I knew exactly what it said. What I wanted to see was their reaction. Jeffrey appeared at my study door an hour later, holding the letter like it was contaminated. "Did you do this?" His voice shook. "Did you report us to the IRS?" "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me. This is too convenient. The yacht seizure, the eviction, and now this? You're destroying us." I set down my book, looked at him calmly. "The IRS conducts audits based on evidence of tax fraud. If you're being audited, perhaps you should examine your own choices rather than blaming me." "You know what Lindsay's been doing. You know about the sponsorships." "I know she's been running a commercial business from my property without a license. I know she never asked permission. I know she's been earning substantial income. What I don't know is whether she properly reported that income. That's between her and the IRS." He stared at me, and I saw the exact moment he realized the full scope of what I'd done. Not just the yacht, not just the house. I'd dismantled their entire financial foundation. "How much do they want?" I asked, genuinely curious. $18,000 in back taxes, another $6,000 in penalties, Plus, they're investigating the yacht rentals. If they find those, his voice broke. We don't have that money. We don't have anything close to that. Perhaps you could sell the yacht to pay it. Oh, wait. I let the pause hang. The yacht's been seized. My mistake. This isn't funny. You're right. It's not. It's justice. You committed tax fraud, Jeffrey. You ran an illegal rental business with property that was collateral on a loan. You violated multiple laws. The IRS is simply doing their job. He left, slamming the door. I heard him and Lindsay arguing upstairs. Heard her crying. Heard the panic in their voices as they called accountants, tax lawyers, anyone who might help. But there was no help to give. The evidence was solid. The case was airtight. They'd pay the penalties or they'd face criminal charges. The financial pressure mounted quickly. Within days, Jeffrey's credit card was declined at a restaurant. Their bank accounts were frozen pending the IRS investigation. Lindsay's remaining sponsorships evaporated when word got out about the audit. Brands didn't want to be associated with tax fraud. Then Jeffrey's work situation collapsed. I learned about it from Caleb, who'd heard through mutual friends. Jeffrey had been under stress, snapping at colleagues, missing deadlines. His boss called him in for a meeting about his attitude problems. They didn't fire him, but they demoted him, cut his salary from $6,200 to $3,800 a month. He's falling apart, Caleb told me, concerned despite everything. He's still my dad, Grandpa. I hate what he did to you, but seeing him like this... I know. I did know. Part of me, a small part, still remembered the boy who used to wait for me by the window. But that boy was gone, replaced by someone who'd chosen greed over family. The deadline approached, July 1st, move-out day. Jeffrey and Lindsay had stopped talking to me entirely. They packed in silence, their movements mechanical. I watched from my study window as they loaded boxes into a rental truck. They'd found an apartment on the east side of Austin, 1,200 square feet for $1,400 a month, a far cry from living in an $847,000 house for $400. The yacht sold at auction. I got the notice in the mail. Final sale price, $64,000, almost half what Jeffrey had paid for it. The money went to the bank for the loan. After paying off the $73,400 owed, Jeffrey was left with a debt of $9,400. Lindsay's Instagram was dying, down to 28,000 followers from her peak of 50,000. No sponsorships, no income. Her dreams of influencer stardom gone. And through it all, I sat in my study, managing my affairs, planning the final transfer of the house to Caleb, and feeling nothing but the cold certainty that I'd done exactly what needed to be done. They'd chosen to treat me as an obstacle to their ambitions. I'd simply removed myself from that equation and let them face the consequences of their choices. On the last evening before their move, as I watched them carry out the last of their belongings, I thought about what Lindsay had written in that text message. If he'd just die already, we could move on with our lives. Well, I hadn't died. I'd gotten stronger. And now they were the ones moving on, just not in the direction they'd planned. The first day of July arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that makes Austin feel like a furnace, appropriate weather for what was about to happen. I'd been awake since 5, sitting in my study, waiting. The eviction was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Jeffrey and Lindsay had made it clear they wouldn't leave voluntarily. 2 days earlier, Jeffrey had actually changed the locks on their bedroom door, as if that would stop what was coming. At 9:30, I heard movement upstairs, frantic packing sounds. The reality of the situation had apparently penetrated their denial sometime in the night. Too little, too late. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sheriff Deputy Martinez, no relation to my lawyer, and 2 other officers. Behind them stood Caleb, holding a folder of documents. "Mr. Stanley?" Deputy Martinez was professional, efficient. "We're here to execute the eviction order for Jeffrey Stanley and Lindsay Stanley." "Come in. They're upstairs." The deputies walked through my house, with the confidence of people who'd done this before. I followed, curious to see how Jeffrey and Lindsay would handle this final moment. They were in their bedroom, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Lindsay's face was blotchy from crying. Jeffrey looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You have to leave now," Deputy Martinez said. You have until 4 this afternoon to remove your belongings. Anything left after that becomes property of the homeowner." "This is insane," Lindsay said, but her voice lacked its usual fight. "We have nowhere to go." "That's not my concern, ma'am. You were given 30 days' notice. Today is the deadline." I watched Jeffrey's face as understanding sank in. This was really happening. No last-minute reprieve, no miracle, just the cold machinery of justice grinding forward. "Dad," Jeffrey tried one more time. "Please, we can work something out. I'm sorry." "You were given 30 days, I interrupted. "You chose to spend them fighting instead of planning. That's not my problem." The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. Movers Jeffrey had hired at the last minute, expensive ones, eating into what little money they had left, carried boxes and furniture out to a truck. I stayed in my study, listening to the sounds of their departure. Around 3 in the afternoon, Caleb brought me coffee. He looked troubled. "You okay, Grandpa?" "I'm fine. Why?" It's hard to watch, even knowing what they did." I took the coffee, considered my grandson. "You have a kind heart, Caleb. That's good. But kindness shouldn't mean accepting cruelty. They made their choices." "I know. It's just weird seeing Dad like this. The man you're seeing now is who he chose to become, not who he was forced to be. Remember that." At 3:45, Deputy Martinez knocked on my study door. "They're ready to go, Mr. Stanley. Do you want to say anything?" I walked out to the front of the house. Jeffrey and Lindsay stood by their rental truck, surrounded by boxes and the remnants of their life here. Lindsay wouldn't look at me. Jeffrey met my eyes, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Resignation. He'd finally accepted it. Caleb stood beside me, holding the notarized documents, transferring the house to his name. "Jeffrey," I said quietly, "do you remember what you told me when I asked for help with my surgery?" He didn't answer, just stood there, shoulders slumped. "You told me that struggling would make me stronger, that limping would build my character. I want you to know, you were right. I did get stronger, strong enough to do this." I turned to Caleb, took the documents from his hand, and held them up so Jeffrey could see them clearly. "This house is worth $847,000. I'm giving it to Caleb, not because I don't love you, but because love without respect is worthless." Caleb pawned his only transportation, his motorcycle, to bring me $900 when I needed help. $900 he couldn't afford to lose. "You spent $95,000 on a yacht and told me pain builds character." Lindsay finally looked up, her face twisted with rage. "You're a vindictive old—" "Choose your next words carefully," Deputy Martinez interrupted. "I'm still here." She closed her mouth, but her eyes held pure hatred. "Caleb earned this house," I continued, "not by blood, by character, by choosing to be family when you chose to be parasites. The yacht sold at auction for $64,000. After paying your loan, you owe the bank $9,400 more. The IRS wants $31,800 in back taxes and penalties. Your apartment costs $1,400 a month. Your combined income is, what, $4,800 with your demotion?" Jeffrey's face went pale. I'd laid out their entire financial disaster in numbers, cold, precise, inescapable. "You're going to struggle," I said. "You're going to wonder how you'll make ends meet. You're going to feel what it's like to be dismissed and ignored when you need help. And maybe, if you're lucky, it will build your character. Just like you said, it would build mine." I turned to Caleb. "The house is yours. Officially and legally, these deputies are witnesses." Caleb stepped forward, and I handed him the keys to the house. Not the keys Jeffrey had. Those I'd already had changed. New keys for the new owner. Jeffrey watched his son take the keys to what should have been his inheritance. Watched me put my hand on Caleb's shoulder. Watched his world crumble in the Texas heat. "You have until 4 o'clock, Deputy Martinez reminded them. "It's 3:50 now." They left without another word. Jeffrey driving, Lindsay in the passenger seat, both staring straight ahead. The truck followed them down Westlake Drive, and I watched until they disappeared. The deputies left. Caleb and I stood in the driveway, looking at the house that was now his. "I still can't believe it," he said softly. "Believe it? You earned it." "What about you? You're staying, right?" I smiled. "If you'll have me as a tenant." "Grandpa, I'm joking. This is our house now. Partners. You and me. He hugged me then, and I let him. We stood there in the driveway, the afternoon sun beating down, the house behind us quiet for the first time in 3 years. Justice had been served. Not revenge, justice. And it felt exactly right. The weeks that followed were the best I'd had in years. Caleb moved in properly, bringing his textbooks and tools. We cleared out the guest room Lindsay had used as her studio and converted it into a proper study space for him. The terrace, my terrace, became mine again. I started having my coffee there every morning, reading the newspaper, enjoying the peace. We turned one of the garages into a workshop for my hobbies. My collection of antique legal documents had a proper home now, displayed in cases Caleb built himself. He was good with his hands, my grandson. Practical. Real. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the eviction, Caleb came home from the pawn shop with a grin on his face. "Look what I got back," he said, wheeling his motorcycle into the driveway. "Caleb, you didn't have to. I sold part of your antique collection, the pieces you said you didn't care about. Got $12,000 for them. Used part of it for this." He patted the bike. "You were right, by the way. That collection was worth way more than you thought." I shook my head, smiling. "You're supposed to save that money for school." "I am saving it. But I needed my bike, and you needed to see me get it back. Full circle, right?" Full circle indeed. He'd pawned it to help me. I'd helped him get it back. Family, real family, worked like that. Jeffrey called twice in those first weeks. I let both calls go to voicemail. The first message was angry, full of accusations and threats. The second was different, quieter, almost broken. "Dad, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry." I deleted both messages without responding. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt, and I was okay with that. Lindsay's Instagram died its final death. Her follower count dropped to 18,000. No sponsors, no income, just a dead account full of old posts showing a lifestyle that no longer existed. She deleted everything eventually. The whole account just gone, like it had never been. Marcus, my investigator, sent me one last update. Jeffrey and Lindsay had found an apartment on the east side, 1,200 square feet, for $1,400 a month. Jeffrey was still working, barely holding on to his demoted position. Lindsay had taken a job at a retail store. Their marriage, according to Marcus's sources, was strained. They fought constantly. Jeffrey blamed Lindsay for turning him against me. Lindsay blamed Jeffrey for not fighting harder. Both blamed each other for the financial disaster. "They're miserable," Marcus had said, his tone neutral. "Thought you'd want to know." "I don't take pleasure in their misery," I told him honestly, "but I don't feel guilty about it either. They chose their path." August arrived, bringing slightly cooler weather. Caleb started his senior year at University of Texas. He worked part-time at the garage, studied at night, and somehow found time to help me maintain the house. We developed a routine: morning coffee on the terrace, evening dinners where we'd talk about his classes, my legal cases from the old days, life. One evening in mid-August, we sat on the terrace playing chess. The same terrace Lindsay had claimed as her creative space, the same terrace where Jeffrey and Lindsay had plotted to warehouse me in a nursing home. Now it was mine again, ours. "Check," Caleb said, moving his bishop. I studied the board, already seeing the checkmate coming in 3 moves. "You're getting better at this." "You taught me well?" He paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever regret it? What you did to Dad?" I considered the question carefully. "No, I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my son became someone who could treat his own father that way. But the actions I took, no regrets." "Even though he's your son?" "Especially because he's my son. I raised him better than that. He knew right from wrong. He chose wrong, repeatedly, deliberately. At some point, consequences become necessary." Caleb moved another piece. "Checkmate." I looked down at the board. He'd won. "Well done." "You let me win." "Maybe a little. You earned it." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Austin. The house behind us was quiet, peaceful, exactly how a home should feel. "Grandpa?" "Yes?" "Thank you. For all of this. For trusting me. For..." He gestured at the house, the terrace, everything. For seeing me. You made it easy. All you had to do was be yourself, be decent, be family. That's all I ever wanted from Jeffrey. But he chose differently. You didn't. Another silence. Then Caleb said quietly, I ran into Dad yesterday, at the grocery store. I looked at him sharply. And? He looked small, tired. He saw me, but didn't come over. Just nodded and walked away. Lindsay was with him. She pretended not to see me at all. How did that make you feel? Sad, but also, I don't know, like I understood why you did what you did. He really did choose this, didn't he? He did. Every step of the way. Caleb reset the chessboard, setting up the pieces for another game. You know what I realized? For 68 years, you thought family meant blood. DNA, obligation. But it doesn't, does it? No, I agreed. It doesn't. Family is the person who shows up, who sacrifices, who sees you struggling and helps without being asked. That's what makes family real. I looked at my grandson, this young man who'd pawned his most valuable possession to help an old man walk, who'd studied hard, worked hard, lived with integrity, who sat here now in a house he'd earned through character rather than inheritance. You know, I said, moving my first pawn, I spent 35 years as a judge, delivered thousands of verdicts, ruled on cases involving millions of dollars, complex legal questions, constitutional issues. But this, I gestured at the house, at him, at us. This might be the most important verdict I ever delivered. What verdict was that? That justice isn't about punishment. It's about consequences meeting choices. That family isn't about blood, it's about character. That love without respect is worthless, and that sometimes the old man needs to show the young ones what strength really looks like. Caleb smiled. Not so old anymore. You're walking without a limp. Hip surgery worked perfectly. It did. Turns out struggling didn't make me stronger. Having a grandson who understood the meaning of family, that's what made me stronger. We played chess until the stars came out, made dinner together, cleaned up side by side. 2 generations, 2 people who understood what mattered. Somewhere across town, Jeffrey and Lindsay were probably fighting about money, about blame, about their collapsed dreams. But that was their story now, not mine. Mine was here, in this house, with this grandson, playing chess on a terrace I'd reclaimed, living a life built on justice rather than bitterness. I'd spent 68 years believing blood defined family. Took me that long to learn the truth. Family is defined by actions, by choices, by showing up when it matters. Caleb had shown up with $900 he couldn't afford to lose. Jeffrey had shown up with a yacht and told me pain builds character. And now each of them had exactly what they'd earned. That's not revenge, that's justice. And justice, properly served, doesn't need apology or explanation. It simply is. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.